So before I get into planking, I'm going to point out a couple of the things that are usually done wrong. Number one, when you start a model, figure out how you're going to mount it first. Are you going to use a cradle or are you going to use pedestals? Because that's the time that you put the mountings in. Too many people wait till the ship is done and try to drill the holes in. So to give you an example now, this is the cradle for this ship. Those are number 6 screws going through there. And you use number 6 because if you're going to ever mount it with another board, you want to go through the board and into the ship. So in order to do that, you have to drill a hole through a piece of material, usually about this thick, and that's to put a number. You have about 15 thousandths on each side of clearance to get the screw through, so you need to do that up front. And if you guys have trouble doing that, I can do it for you because I can hold stuff pretty parallel and drill. So number one, make sure you figure out how you're going to mount it. Now number two, if you're using a cradle, here's again why you do it up front. You figure out where your cradle is going to be, and then you take these forms, the bulkhead frames, and you can match that to your cradle in the area it's going to be. So now you have the template for wherever this cradle sets taken right off the bulkhead form. So now you've already got a perfect match to perfect detail. There'll be a little bit changed with the wood, but that's an easier, quicker, faster way when you work with cradles to do this up front. Most people don't pay enough attention to the fact that if you get into the ship too soon, there's times where you can't do that anymore. The next thing that I'm going to talk about is when you start planking a ship, especially if they have the bulkheads spaced quite a bit, when you get to the front, take a piece of balsa wood, glue a couple together, and form your front piece, because that's going to be the area that is going to be the most critical to bring your wood around. So balsa fits in real nice, it's easy to trim. So whenever you have places where you have tight bends and you're going to want to get your planks together, make sure that you just do that filling in this portion right here. The other thing that's important is you don't want to get twists in your frame. So what you do is when you have the keel and it's in the keel form, you want to then just take and put that on a board. It's a mounting board to keep the keel parallel while you're working with the unit. And that is when you do that, you have your piece mounted. Then I put little supports in between these frames, scrap pieces, so that the thing can't twist. Then you never have to worry when you get to the point where you're putting your plank on that you're twisting it. So you can plank pretty heavy on one side or the other, and it generally works pretty good. The next thing that it depends upon, but if you get to the bigger ships, you want to be able to hold and work on this ship. So what I did in this particular case, I find that the best way that you can hold it is holding it by the keel, but I designed these little extension blocks in here that work with these lices so that they come up and hold on the keel far enough in so you've got a good hold of the thing. It's not going to go anyplace.
Good idea.
And then when you plank, I just leave that little hole open, and afterwards it's in the bottom. I just fill the plank in. But in this particular case, I have full access to working on the ship, and you can work on it in any position that you want, which really works good for holding the ship. So number one, take time to figure out a good way to. These work really good for me. It's my own design, but you clamp in here, and you're just extending your jaws, and you've got a really good hold on this ship, so you can handle it pretty well. So that's the item that I want to dwell on first, is that you get the ship mounted correctly. Now, before you get into planking, take a look at what your planks are. If you have real wide planks, that's the worst condition you can have, because most of the time you're trying to bend wood around this way or this way, and the wider the plank is, the worse it is, the harder it is to plank your hull. So when you do planking and you have real wide planks, when you get to real tight areas, I cut that plank in half. Because when you're going around curves like this, your wood doesn't want to bend this way, so you just use smaller planks. Now the other thing is, when you're working on a ship like this, you'll notice that the distance around the big part here is a lot less than in the front. Well, when you're putting the planks on, what you want to do, if you could have fatter planks here and skinnier ones up here, so what you do is you taper the plank. And this is a real easy way to do it. Again, you have to invest in a few of these pattern vices, but they work really slick. In this particular case, 2 pieces of angle iron, a guide board like this, clamped in here. So I adjust this to probably 1/8 of an inch up here. Back here is the full distance. So when I put my board in here, it'll lay at this angle. When I drop it into my vise, these two vices will just drop into the vise like this, and you've got your board sticking up, and you just plane the board off, and you get a perfectly tapered plank. The reason you do that is you're making up distance change, because I usually go down to 1/8 of an inch. If they're smaller, I can go down smaller, but these planks were almost 1/4 of an inch wide. So as you taper them down, you're now putting the same amount of plank in, but you're following the curve of the ship without having to put stellar fits in. Now those you can do. What you don't want to do is get a lot of edge bending, because they didn't do edge bending. Those logs were too heavy. So now we've covered the idea how you want to shape your plank. The next thing is you want to wet the plank, because they're just a little more pliable, but be careful that you don't soak them too long, because when you get in and they start drying, they do shrink quite a bit. But in this particular case, when you're going to make the bends, I have 2 units here that work very good. This one is one that works real good, because I can put the plank in here and I can just roll it into the shape I want, and it's kind of fun. Planking can really be fun it's a fun thing if you do it right. And then the other one that you can buy, this is one through Model Expo, works the same way. You've got the round piece here, you just go along and you just kind of put the shape in that you want. So now you've actually taken your plank and you've actually got it shaped, and you wet it, and you're going to install it onto the ship. 4 methods that you can use that work. They all work. The first method, these are items that you can buy. This is a little device that actually is sold in I think it's Micro Mart. Probably the most useless thing you could ever buy in your life. I bought a set of them. They're a total disaster to work with. You can't handle them, they don't hold on, and they don't bend enough. So I designed my type of a clamp here, which is basically made out of wood with the grain. I think I used birch here. And the idea being that I've got them, you just push them on and you flip them up and it holds the piece of wood. So in this particular case, when I'm going along, I've got my glue down, and actually always glue the edges of your plank. Very important, edge glue them all the time. So now when you want to get your plank up against, and you don't want to drill a hole, or you can't drill a hole, and this type of a clamp works pretty good, because I can flip it back, I can put it down, push it down, and it stays in place pretty good. this is my version of what this should have been. And I made 12 of these. So that's one way that I hold them. The other way, if you're good at it, and it works, Bob Becker has real good luck doing this, you can put the glue on, hold the board on, and hit it with some CA glue. And if you're a little patient and you haven't glued your finger, that's why I don't use it too much. I've glued my fingers on. It's painful when you can pull it off. I mean, because there's skin left there. The fastest thing that glues is your finger. Believe me, there's nothing that glues faster than your finger. And so when you do this method, I have to look at Bob's fingers and just see what his fingers look like. But it works pretty good, seriously. You just put your glue on like you know, and just give it a little dab of this and take a stick and hold it against there and be a little patient and it'll work. However, what I found in building ships is no matter what kit I work with, I will always double plank. Why? First place, you can see how far these frames are spread apart. Okay, you need quite a bit of a bridging in here and you need to kind of get this shape, so you need a lot of wood that you can sand with and work away to get the blend that you want. All right, in this particular case, since these are clamps that are sold by, I think they're in Micro Mark True, yeah. They're really pretty good. I modify them a little bit. I put plastic handles on, but it's really just a hardened little screw. You drill a 25 thousandths hole into as you're putting your wood down, you hold it and you drill a little hole through, and you just screw right through that plank. You screw this thing down, and you can actually, works very fast because now when you have this wet piece of wood on there and you've got your shape and form, you just literally can go and screw it down, and let the thing dry, and then unscrew your screws, and then you've got the thing right in place. Now, if you're doing a finishing planking that you only have a single plank and it's say a 16 thick, the way this clamp really comes is it's got a little clamp on it here. So it's got a little leg here. So you drill the hole below the plank and you actually use the little clamping device to hold it. Hence, there's no screw hole in the wood. So there's two ways that you can use this. So number one, you can either glue it on like this, or you can, if you're going to do it this way, you might as well just put a hole through it. Nobody's going to see it anyway. And don't spend too much time when you double plank trying to fill cracks in here, because you're going to put your covering over that anyway, and this is really big. So there's actually all the different ways. This thing was so miserable to use, I couldn't believe they sell something. And then you have to assemble it on top of it. It's the crappiest thing I ever seen, so that's how I developed that. So when you're looking at the planking now, once you get this done, if you're going to do your second planking, and Tom, you did second planking on there, because you now have a full base on here, you can just put the glue on you're usually like a 32nd thick or a little thinner than that, and you can glue them right on, and you don't have to, I don't do, I didn't do one of the small thin ones, I just flat them. Yeah. And you can push them into place. So, backing up a little bit is, if you're going to do planking, I've learned that after building, this will be my 17th ship here, I will never build another ship without double planking. It's just that much easier. You don't get a job like that. That's a beautiful piece of work, but you couldn't do that single planking. There's no way. There's no way you could do that.
The other way that a lot of people like to do is to fill between each bulkhead with balsa wood.
Yeah.
And then, in essence, make a
solid model.
Solid model.
Yeah, yeah.
But I couldn't do that on this.
No, you got gun parts. And I'm going to say, if you're going back to what Tom mentioned, when you have your basic frame, if you simply just take and put those, just measure the distance between these and put a glue support here and a support here, and you've got your keel here, they're not going any place, they're staying straight. and then you can pull that off. So what I tried to do is show you some of the things the way I do it. Now this is curious because in this kit, and anybody that wants these can have them. These are hardened balsa planking strips, called the hardened balsa planking strips. Well, I'm so used to doing it this way, I didn't want to use these, and I didn't even try to use them. But I'll pass them around to anybody that wants them. They're interesting because I've never seen, and they write them up in there, that this is an option that you can use. Pass these around. But I elected to use the old-fashioned way. And then the other thing I'm going to point out is when you're building ships that are basically, yeah.
All right, on the first planking, the thickness of that planking is always the second planking thinner?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And it's usually a higher grade wood. Yeah, by far. So that's why the second planking is just a lot easier. And the other thing is, you can do single planking if you're going to paint it, because you can put wood filler in and you can paint over it. But when you do a job like that, you don't use wood filler and that stuff. You gotta have those formed or shaped, right?
I make my own wood filler.
Yeah.
By the time you lay these things out and start sanding it,
Yeah.
you fill in most of it.
Mm-hmm. You just
And
don't suck it out with a vacuum.
No, what I do is I usually take 50-50 mixture of the white glue and water,
Mm-hmm.
and brush all the sawdust down into a pile and put some water in it, and then
It's your filler.
lay it on there and then just sand over it.
You get, and that works unless the crack's too big, because then you
Yeah.
don't have grain anymore. So it's
You
still,
actually want to have some
yeah,
distance in
yeah,
there.
or it won't stay in there. So basically, another thing, if you build, and I didn't catch on to this on the first ship, but if you're building the European ships, you're going to notice that they have these big bulkhead things coming up in here. Well, those are really only to form the shape of your curve, because you got to saw those dudes off. So what I did is now I put a piece of double back tape between, so I don't glue them onto there. The first time I had them glued on, they were trying to break them off. And the second thing is, when you have this, these will all disappear. And I saw them halfway through from the outside before I do any planking. Then I only have to saw the inside, and they're not glued on. This is, Bill, this is what I'm talking about, the learning process. You know, here I'm ship number 17, and I'm still figuring out shit. So that's the interesting part and the fun part about it too. Is so at this point, oh, nobody wanted these, huh? There you go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What are you using for fasteners on that?
Pardon me?
Fasteners?
The glue?
Yeah, are those, yeah, your black marks there.
You've nailed it.
Those are drilled holes. Those are just drilled holes left in there.
Oh, those are drilled
Pass
holes?
this around, you can see
Yeah,
this.
okay.
You can take a look at.
You didn't put until they dried little nails in those?
No, what I did is I used that single screw
Yeah,
without the clamp.
I've got a set of these.
Yeah, I use them without the clamp, I just screw them in. You
Yeah,
can see like I did it in that one right there.
yeah.
There's no need, the clamp is just more time. In shipbuilding, you never get faster, you just get smarter. And you do concordance.
Yeah.
That's why the CA, I use the CA
Yeah.
to tack it in place
Yeah.
about every third or fourth.
Yeah.
I use these.
Yeah,
And then I don't put holes in anything, I don't have to screw anything.
yeah.
And put yellow glue between them on the regular ones. But it's a choice you make.
Yeah, the reason I like to use them where I can screw them in is I'm doing some pretty neat twists and bends and turns. So the other thing is, that's why I'm saying If you're trying to take a plank that's straight and go around a curve like this, you just have to shorten the plank because it can't make, the arc is too big before the planks don't bend this way. And the last trick I do in the front here is if you were going to take a cone and wrap a plank around a cone, right around, you'd find that it fits tight, but then as the cone goes up, it gets looser. You have that effect can happen up in the front here because your radius is going here, but the bottom radius is less. So now you're making the turn, but you got too much wood there. So what I do on those, I put every so often I saw 3/4 of the way through, and then that means that you just have those slots, those pieces can bend in, and you've just got about maybe 20% of the wood that has to make the turn. The rest just bend in, and when they bend in, they almost close up, and when you sand it over, they sand over. So that's how you would plank around the cone, if you're going to plank around the cone. Things like that, because it's frustrating, if you don't do that, you're going to get one, and then the next plank isn't going to fit because the top is hanging over, or the bottom's hanging over. So, I don't know if you, yeah, you can see them, the little slots here.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, those are the things that I've never read in any book, but they're common sense. I mean, it's a piece of wood.
And you know, Duane, to kind of elaborate on planking, what you're trying to do on the initial set of planking is set the shape of the hole.
There you go.
You're not trying to be, well, I don't necessarily have all my frames square. If one's warped or something, that good. And unless you're an expert with a really keen eye, you're not going to notice that it's a misshape from one side to the other. And in the first planking that I do, I just kind of throw it on there. And if there's gaps in it, who cares? It's going to get covered over.
Here's your planking thing. With your hand.
You just want it to be fair,
And-
so that your finished planking will look fair.
And what's going to happen here, guys, it always does, even though you try to keep these exactly straight, one will be in farther and one will be out farther. So we call that fairing the hall. So when you fair the hall, you take a plank and go across and get a smooth feel. A lot of times I will have to glue a piece in where you're short.
That's probably one of the most, or second most important things
Yeah.
in getting a fair hall.
And that means that when one side is going to be too far this way, okay, you just sand it off so you get the board to go. When you feel that, take a board, a thinner board, and go across there, you'll feel right away. If it doesn't go, just glue a little thin piece in underneath there, and you'll get what you need. It's a common thing. Just do that up front when you're doing that.
But we, at Northern Bowl, we were building 61-foot yachts when I first started. The mold, you'd think that a mold would look like the lobster mold, nice and fair. This one went, it had a big chunk out of the starboard side. But after it was all finished, unless you sat there and really eyeballed it, you never saw it.
What I always do is I take a two by two and attach it to the last and the first up here. And it makes a nice curve, but then you're gonna see there's a space there and the bundle. And it's really a lot of tension has to go into that.
Yeah, it's where you learn that there's some things you take the time to do because they're going to cost you more time if you didn't. And those are Bill, that's what I was trying to say. Those are all the things that you just learn as you go on. That's the fun part about it, though, because you're figuring out how to do this, how to do that, and that's kind of
How do you know where to start planking at?
most of the companies will tell you where they want you to start the planking. Generally, if you're going around the main section here, 3 or 4 planks will be non-tapered at all. And then after that, I start tapering the planks. And then I go, here again, you're building a model. I don't know in a real ship if you did it that way, but if you look on this one here, you see I went around here, pretty soon this is getting to be a difficult bend, so I come and start bringing them up from the bottom. So I've actually, when I plank and all, I actually plank down about to here, and then I start planking from the bottom to here, and then I had another fit. You wanna, what fits well, and it seems like when you get down to this point, now you're below the water line anyway, and this is going to be painted or whatever, it doesn't make any difference. I'm not sure that they build ships that way, but it's an easier way to build them up. It's just common sense, let your wood flow as much as you can. And in this particular case, you can see that the tapering, there's a few stellar fits that I have to do. I have to do it there, just take a sharp knife and cut them in. But
Can you turn it toward us?
here, take a look at it.
We're not having a meeting next month, right?
Well, next month's our last meeting, and then I'm going to
Oh, okay.
take a 3-month break.
Right.
Now, while we're doing that, if you guys wanna
Yes, okay, I was
have a
wondering
breakfast
about
meeting
that
or
because
something,
I always started
or
to
somebody
garbage.
else wants to have a
You know?
meeting.
It's,
But
I
we
can
don't
see
have
now,
any
okay,
elected
so
officers
just
in
patch
this
it up.
place, so anybody that wants
Is
to
it
run
one
the
hole,
show
cause it's
can.
turning, cause
So
down,
if
it's
somebody
turning,
wants to
curve,
put on a
you
meeting,
know,
I'm just
doesn't
taking
matter,
3
just a
months
big
break.
What I was
hole.
gonna mention is there's
Yeah.
another alternative way to bend wood. And the way I use that, you see the hair curve.
Oh, yeah,
And,
yeah.
and I thought I'd bring that in. If it-
Yeah, we'll have another
They
meeting.
may have been
Yeah,
nails.
and that's
And
not places
another thing,
available.
guys,
Yeah.
I'll point out, you don't always, on mild bends, you don't need to wet the wood. Just you got this thing hot, you can actually form a pretty good shape dry, so I don't wet, if it's just, if you want the natural curve in there, you just, and that wood will just start coming up, it'll shrink it, so you don't have to always wet the wood, but if you're going to start putting in a tight turn or something, it's kind of nice if it's wet, you don't break it.
Did you,
What you want, when you do that, what you want is the steam,
Yeah,
right? So just a light spritzing on there is all you need.
Is that right?
The heat, and that creates enough steam to
yeah,
loosen the fibers.
yeah. It's the fibers that, yeah.
The other thing that I did too, when it comes to bending wood and you got it pretty close on the hull, spray bottle. Just spray the wood and dampen it just a little bit.
Yeah.
And let the form, you know,
That apple
the
bow.
presses will pull that back in. Now, you're using all white glue on that?
You know, they're very yellow carpenter glues. what they
Yeah,
do.
yeah.
You know, there's, what I normally do, particularly on the first layer of planking, is I'll cut a piece of 2x4 with the shape of that model.
Oh,
And I soak my wood in ammonia. And then you have the 2 pieces of wood of the fixture, I guess. Get all the wood in there and clamp them together and leave them sit for 24 hours.
Yeah.
Take them out. And they may not be perfect to the shape,
yeah.
but you can work it.
They'll pull in.
They'll pull in
Yeah.
perfect.
I was gonna say, on an apple bow like that, what I do is I pre-bend 10 pieces of plank
Yeah.
and just let it lay there and then pick them up and use them as I need.
That's interesting.
It's interesting, you say you use ammonia. I don't use ammonia because it wakes me up.
I use alcohol.
I got the-
Oh, yeah.
I use alcohol, I got a piece of 1-inch PVC, plug that one in, alcohol, drop the wood down in there.
There's a little thing when you go in the door where you drop it down a building.
And it doesn't get changed.
That means you get put it out. If you don't have enough in your kit, most of us have extra, I've got a box of extra wood. or if you needed some, you could go up to I can run them through the planer and make whatever thickness you want, and then run it through the salt
It's
cells.
the big mistake I made, it came with half-inch
It fits.
I busted my ass for that stuff.
No, you can see now why. Because you're trying to bend wood like this.
Then I got a bend and stuff shot.
Yeah, so you'd be better to cut that down to like 3/16. or
That lobster,
whatever you
that
use.
lobster blow, you could use a half-inch plank.
Yeah, something like that, yeah. But, I have a box, Bill, I have a box of wood here that I would mix. Any more questions or comments on the?
How much are the full length plankings do you use versus where you might use shorter ones?
In this particular case, I'm using full length. Until I get to the point where I have real tight fits, and then I fit the corners, and then I put the fitting in the center.
And how much of that full length do you glue at a time?
Believe it or not, on this one, I glue the whole board at one time. Because that's where I have a little bit of advantage using these screwed-in things here. Because I can start, if you gotta be fast, you put the glue on this, and then you put edge glue your piece, so you got the glue there, and you start, and you just move along. And this is kind of where, let's see where I put that piece in.
This one over here, Duane.
Yeah. No, I had a piece where I had two pieces put together with that. Oh, here. This is where my little clamps like this that I made come in. Because now your board sometimes midway, watch that, in midway it might be sticking out and they don't match. However, if you're crafty, as the glue sets, you can kind of push them in and they'll stick and hold.
Yeah.
There's a point where you can still move them around, so you want to make sure that one doesn't stick out, one doesn't stick in. I've got those little clamps I put on, just kind of aid that. But I found where I couldn't get in there, it was just about set up. You push it in and hold with your thumb, it'll stay.
Which, did you start from the bottom, from the hall?
No, on this one here, I started actually. This is the one that this is the one they want on first. This is your lead board. I went down 4 boards without putting the taper in. Then I started putting the taper in. As you can see, they start tapering going up here. And when this bend was getting too weird up here, then I started from the bottom and came back up. That's why you see it come up. It's kind of how it's common sense how you float it. Sometimes we get too distracted with sometimes you shouldn't read the instructions because you can't understand what they're trying to say. And right, Bob, I mean,
I think it's a lot of, especially if you ever pick up a Chinese kid.
yeah.
And they tried to write it in English. And
Yeah.
But through that.
If building is more common sense. Think about how would you handle a big piece of wood like that? Well, and like Bill said, he ran into a problem, his planks are way too wide. The wide planks is the worst planking. If you had 1/8-inch wide planks, you'd have a breeze. You breeze. So I have extra wood here, I just run it, just strip them down, make it more mini as you want. I got a whole box of that stuff. So, and then when worse comes to worse, I'll probably go out and buy from the hardware store just a sheet of their 1/16 by 3 inches wide, run through my saw, make planks out of it. But you already experienced what I'm talking about. Wide planks is the worst damn thing you can have on curves. It doesn't make sense. Yeah.
ribs.
One other thing that I do, that it's a messy job, but I use Durham's wood putty.
Mhm.
And after I get the thing planked, I'll smear it with Durham's wood putty, the whole thing, and then sand it fair.
Yeah, but that's single planking you're talking
No, no.
about.
Double planking.
You're wasting time.
I am, but that's how I do it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I brought up. I mean,
Yeah, there's so many
you
different ways
do what
to
you
do
want
it.
to do. You're doing something because it makes you feel good. maybe you like the feel of rubbing your hand, maybe your eyes get glassy when you put enough, I don't know.
I like to breathe the dust.
Yeah, you like the dust.
I think I'm gonna start cheating. As soon as I get finished with this, I'm gonna go over to visit with him. And I'm gonna get my 3D printer out, and we're gonna make a ship with my 3D printer.
No, there are easier ships to build than this one.
That's true.
And
Okay.
Duane, when I first joined, you had a deal, it was just made of wood, and did it have an angle on it like this or something, and we just put the plank on it, and it wasn't as fancy as that.
This is what it was, I've never changed. You got this stacker, goes like this, and you drop your piece of wood in here, and you plate it. And that's why, I'm not telling you what to buy, but I have 4 of these panel vices, and you can see how I use them for holding this, and then the other ones I can use if I wanna drop them in here, and you got a nice vice just to.
And you can get those pan vices, lookalikes, over
Yeah.
at Harbor Freight for half the price.
Yeah, as long as they do the same thing.
Yeah, it does.
And here again, the clamp, this is important, is if you want to use them, these are made out of birch or something. These extended jaws are really the cat's meow. I'm not saying just because I made them, but
And that's not a lot more.
this is what they pass.
That's a lot more sturdy than just trying to clamp the keel.
Oh yeah, you're gonna break the keel, yeah, because you're coming on.
Yeah.
And then your bottom board, they drop in here, so they stay in place. The
Yeah.
bottom one is your spacer, which is the thickness, so then when you clamp it, the jaw closes on top.
A thing I might mention too, that while he's got his clamp, Duane cut these for me, so I can actually, these go in the clamp when the ship is upside down.
Yeah, if I have to hold if I do have to hold the ship upside down for anything now, I'll use the holes where the masts are.
Yeah.
Make little stuff.
Yeah.
But most of the work, the heavy work will pretty much be
Right.
done. But it's just, now look how the ship is still, I just got it on one, it's still hanging in there real nice. I took this back one off. It's kind of fun stuff to do that because it makes you creative. Okay, how can I hold this? You can see, Tom, if you hold it by the keel, that ain't going no place.
That's right.
Yeah.
I like that. I'm gonna copy that.
Could you mention the bill? I told him that you put blocks between the bulkheads to
Yeah,
add
yeah.
some additional support to
Yeah.
you show the bill.
Yeah, in this particular case, I didn't have to because we had a whole centerpiece constructed through here. But ordinarily, I'll put spacers in here so that they're kind of held in line, but it keeps it rigid then. But the keel board is necessary when you start the keel board. So, these were the ones that I really felt kind of neat about because they work so slick. You can get your board up and just put them in there. This didn't work. Don't buy these.
Those pins, I got a bunch of those. I got a bunch of them too. You can have.
Yeah, these are available in, I think, in Micromark.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I just put plastic over here because they have to drill finish it. And these, if you drill a 25 thousandths hole, they won't split. That's your body size for that. But again, if you can see what I'm talking about when you talk about putting these holes in here, you can see how much space you've got left. Not much to get that screw through there, through the center. That's why if you guys need any help, I can do that stuff for you. I'd be glad to do it.
Now, Duane, you mentioned something that, again, would you tell Bill what they are? If you have spaces between some of your planks, what are those called again?
Sealers, yeah.
Yeah,
But what I do is, rather than have, if you're gonna fit one in, I cut halfway up and then cut the other board away and then just lay the plank over and mark it and then just fit it in. So you could just avoid the sharp edge, so just cut up into the other board and lay the thing in there. But if you do the taper thing, you don't end up with too many. It's amazing because, you know, those are only an eighth of an inch up there, and these are almost just a little under a quarter, so you're covering quite a bit of curve here when you come around.
I'm always amazed how you bend it and it makes the shape of the hole.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. Yeah.
I think that's an incredible
What is
thing.
that?
Birch,
That is birch, huh?
yeah. Yeah, I made 12 of those,
Really, huh?
yeah.
You know, there's one thing wrong with this type of clamp, is if you use the little, what do you want, this rectangle,
Mm-hmm.
if you put too much pressure on here, it'll break.
It bends them, because if you notice, I remade those are aluminum ones I made myself. I
Okay.
rebuilt those too.
Oh,
Well,
yes.
the original ones
No,
are
they're,
a very soft material.
yeah, they're,
And if you crank down on
Yeah.
this, it's going to crack.
I just I made those out of a piece of aluminum angle iron.
Ah, okay.
So, yeah, I forgot to tell you, I had to modify those too.
I
But,
should have known.
no, but it's just,
What a dummy.
well, it's just ideas I thought I'd share with you because it's stuff that I don't know, a lot of this you don't read in books, but you figure it out as time goes on, you eat.
It's better if you're a reader and an observer. I learn both ways, you know.
Yeah,
So if I
yeah.
can see something, it's easier than if I read it.
This is really a neat deal because
It is.
the biggest hole I have in here is just this little bit in here, and I'll just fill that in later on, that's underneath.
Yeah.
But you got a hold of that, and then the reason these are set this way is so that they drop into the vise and stay in place, they don't fall all over when you're trying to.
You're a good model maker.
I
Jig
like-
maker.
I like to do this kind of stuff in the town.
That, the fun part to me is
Like here,
figuring how to
Tom,
do
all
something
they
and
do
making
is-
something up.
That's right.
You know, how to do it.
Yeah, make a
You
jig
fit
or
'em in
something
this
like that,
way,
yeah.
Then
You're
they
right.
stay in place, they hold here and they straddle the screw. The next one goes in here and works out pretty good that way.
You gotta turn it though, don't you?
Yeah.
Bill, what kind of vise do you use to when you load ammunition? Do you use a vise anyway when you're loading ammunition?